when you know some of the racist things Gandhi wrote back when he was in Africa. For instance, he once wrote that white folks, despite their flaws, should be the predominating race in South Africa. You see, the young Gandhi, as you know, went over to England to get himself an education. It seems it was his dealings with the ruling British that convinced him that Europeans were just more civilized than the black people in Africa. We should say that he changed his entire stance in time and became an anti-racist, but it wasn't always like that. He also wrote in a letter summing up the beliefs to the British that the general belief seems to prevail in the colony that the Indians are a little better, if at all, than the savages or the natives of Africa. He absolutely thought that many Africans were savages, and he used derogatory language too when referring to black people, such as the term kafir. In 1904, he wrote another letter stating that he was upset about these people living amongst Indians, saying, "About the mixing of the Kafirs with the Indians, I must confess I feel most strongly." He wrote that as long as blacks were mixed with Indians, then diseases such as the plague would further spread. You can now understand why some people are now calling Gandhi out. They also accuse him of being a hypocrite, saying that he didn't believe in the rights of Africans at all, while also working with the British government in segregating whites from blacks. A stunning example of this is when Gandhi petitioned the colonial government in South Africa to ensure the Indian people didn't have to share the same queue as black people when they went to the post office in Durban. He didn't think it was fair that Indians couldn't queue with the whites. Some people now try to cover for Gandhi, saying he was just a product of his times, although one would think that a person of high intelligence would still have known right from wrong, even if they didn't always fight for what was right. Others now say that Gandhi was a card-carrying member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and no, we don't mean that bunch of violent, angry neo-Nazis whose pastime is smoking amphetamines and sharpening shivs. We mean the Brotherhood that wore suits and smoked pipes in dingy boardrooms. For example, when asked just how racist Gandhi was, one of his new critics wrote, "Gandhi believed in the Aryan Brotherhood. This involved whites and Indians higher up than Africans on the civilized scale. To that extent, he was a racist. To the extent that he wrote Africans out of history or was keen to join with whites in their subjugation, he was a racist." As we say, Gandhi shifted his stance, but how much he shifted we can't say. The question is, when he was telling people to lie down for the Germans, did any part of him still believe in superior races? You have to remember, when Gandhi was in South Africa, it wasn't as if black people hadn't already for years been fighting for their rights. You can't just say Gandhi was a product of the times, because he knew very well that a race of people rightly felt they were violently oppressed. When Gandhi was in England, he spent most of his time hanging out with intellectuals and the odd vegetarian, and then once he was in South Africa, he found himself having to share the same train carriages and join the same queues of a people he referred to as coolies. He hated this. That much was evident in 1906 when, during the Zulu Rebellion, Gandhi supported the British in what he termed the Revolt of the Kafirs. These people, who he pretty much believed were barbarians, he said deserved British rule because they spent most of their days in indolence and nakedness.